Thank you, Faith, and hello, everyone. Welcome to From Gumbo to Gourmet. I'm glad you all are here, and we have just a wonderful panel that's really going to take us through the foundation, the evolution, and where we're headed in the cuisine here in New Orleans. So certainly I'm going to do a brief intro of each one of our panelists here. I'll start with Chef Marcelle Bienvenu. She's a cookbook author and food writer who has been preparing Cajun and Creole dishes since the 1960s. Marcelle has written on Creole and Cajun cooking for the Times-Picayune, the Life books, and she has been featured in Food and Wine, Savor, Southern Living, the New York Times, Louisiana Life, Acadiana Profile, and most recently, Garden and Gun. She is the author of 3 books, Who's Your Mama, Are You Catholic, and Can You Make a Roux?
Great book, great book.
Answered a yes to all of those. Who's Your Mama, the sequel, in Cajun Cooking for Beginners, and she co-edited Cooking Up a Storm. She also owned and operated restaurant Chef Marcelle near Lafayette, Louisiana, and has worked in several restaurants, including Commander's Palace, K. Paul's Louisiana Kitchen. So welcome to the stage. Next, we have Chef Donald Link, inspired by the Cajun and Southern cooking of his grandparents. Louisiana native, he began his professional cooking career at 15 years old. Since then, Chef Link has peppered the streets of the Warehouse District of New Orleans with a collection of award-winning restaurants over the past 2 decades. Herb Saint, a contemporary take on French-American bistro, is the flagship restaurant of the Link Restaurant Group, as well as Cochon Butcher, Pesh, Gianna, and so on and so on. I will say in 2007, Chef Link was honored with the James Bitt Award, Best Chef South. That same year, Cochon Restaurant was nominated for Best New Restaurant. Later, Pesh was also awarded Best New Restaurant in 2014. Gianna was as well a nominee for Best New Restaurant. So James Bitt is no stranger to Chef Link. So thank you for being on this panel. We have Chef Eric Cook. He is a native of New Orleans, Louisiana, a combat veteran who served 6 years in the United States Marine Corps. With training from the John Fosse Culinary Institute, he began his career at Brennan's in the French Quarter, where he studied under Chef Mike Roussel. Cook joined the team at Commander's Palace as a sous chef. Cook has also worked as a private chef, executive chef, and he led the National War II Museum's American Sector, Dickie Brennan's, Bourbon House, Tommy Cuisine, and Nosh. Before that, though, before he opened the beloved New Orleans restaurant St. John and Gris-Gris, before he cooked for the presidents of the United States, before he joined the Marines, Eric Cook remembers sitting at the dinner table with his family, eating fresh-caught redfish, slow-cooked white beans, and a shrimp and melliton dressing.
That's it. Very dear to my heart.
Since opening Gris-Gris in 2018, it has been named New Orleans' Best Neighborhood Restaurant, New Orleans Reader's Best Restaurant, Reader Magazine's Best Restaurant, on and on and on and on. So thank you, Chef, for being here as well.
Thank you.
Chef Emerald E.J. Lagasse. Chef E.J. Lagasse fell in love with food at a very young age. As the son of Chef Emerald Lagasse, he spent most of his young life in kitchens at home at the family table, and that was the central part of the day. Cooking with his dad at home and exploring new culinary experiences were fundamental to his childhood and instilled a passion for food that continues to grow. At 13, he started working in the kitchen at Merrill Restaurant. Through high school, he continued working for his father at Emerald's Coastal. During the summer breaks, Lagasse had the opportunity to stage at esteemed restaurants such as Café Boulard and Le Bernardin in New York City. E.J. gained invaluable experience working under culinary icons as Chef Daniel Boulard and Chef Eric Ripert, who he still credits as mentors today. After graduating from culinary school at Johnson & Wales, he traveled to work abroad at Core by Claire Smith in Notting Hill and Franson in Stockholm. In 2022, he returned to New Orleans to reopen Emerald's Restaurant, the family's flagship restaurant. Today, he leads the day-to-day culinary operations at Emerald's Restaurant. Lagasse provides himself in fusing together the bounty of Southeast Louisiana produce with modern technique to create and refine menu that tells a story through food. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to start to set the stage as we talk about to Gumbo to Gourmet, and I'm going to start with you, Chef Marcelle Bienvenu. You know, going back in the early stages of your career in the 1970s, what does that look like in New Orleans? What does that look like starting at Commander's Palace and seeing that transition from classically trained French chefs to now Chef Paul Prudhomme coming in with his own culinary and cultural background? Tell us a little story about that.
When I went to work with Commander's, I never thought I was going to be in any kind of business involving food. And Ella Brennan and I became friends when I was working on the Time Life cookbook. And she called me after we finished. She said, "Why don't you come work at Commander's?" And I went, "Oh, Ella, I don't want to work on weekends and at night and on holidays." And she said, "I'll never make you do that." She lied. But they had just moved into Commander's, and they still had a menu that was very similar to other restaurants. You had a turtle soup, you had trout almondine. It was all the same classics. And when she heard about Paul, she said, "Well, maybe he should come work here." And I went, "Oh, I don't know. Little Cajun guy coming to work at the high-class Commander's Palace." But she said, "Nope, we're going to get him." And I was fascinated to see how the Brennans and Chef Paul worked together to introduce a whole new kind of menu to Commander's Palace. And I remember Paul, he came and he said, "I'm going to fix y'all one of my favorite dishes." And it was a pirogue made out of a merleton that he had fried. Then he had filled it with fried oysters and fried shrimp with a sauce that was flavored with tasso. And I went, "I never had that at my house." But, I mean, he was so creative. And, of course, everybody knows about the black and red fish story. So it was interesting to see the change from what Commander's was to a whole new concept of... he brought some of his Cajun background stuff, but he also was very creative and just used a lot of local things and made something like this pirogue. So it was really interesting. And at the time, nobody had chicken and sausage andouille gumbo on the menu in New Orleans. There was seafood and okra gumbo. So when he said he was going to put it on the menu, I said, "Ella, you know, we cook chicken and sausage gumbo with the chicken on a bone, and we're going to have to do something because you can't bring that to the table with all those pretty little ladies." She said, "Oh, we'll just take the meat off. It's going to be all right." And of course, it worked. So it was very interesting to see that change in New Orleans.
No, that's fascinating to see. You know, when you look at restaurants in New Orleans, you see so many different gumbos throughout, and they're all great. I tell people all the time, nobody's gumbo's better than your grandmother's gumbo. But chicken andouille gumbo, okra and seafood gumbo. We do gumbo zeb that's coming up on Holy Thursday. Yeah. And now you start to see the evolution, as you talked about Chef Paul Prudhomme bringing in chicken and sausage and andouille gumbo to Commander's Palace at that time. And it's really the influence of that chef that's coming in, their culture and their background, which leads me to you, Chef Link, with the story, you know, coming in Herb Saint, congratulations, celebrating 20 or 25 years this year? 25 years this year. But when I look at those restaurants that you have created, and they're all great, you know, Herb Saint, the French, and it still tells a New Orleans story with the ingredients, and then going to Cochon, and then going to Pêche, and then to Gianna. Tell us a little bit about that story, one starting with Herb Saint, and then what inspired you to start to tell those stories at Cochon, and then go into the seafood with Pêche.
I grew up in Lake Charles. My family's from Crowley.
I spent some time in San Francisco working out there, went to school out there. So I moved here when my daughter was born. She was about 9 months old when we opened Herb Saint. Now she was here this week. She's 25. I know it's crazy that the Herb Saint restaurant and her kind of grew up at the same rate, I guess. Now I moved when I got here from San Francisco. One of the first things I noticed from coming from that place was that there wasn't a lot of locally grown produce, and there was great seafood, obviously. But there seemed to be a big gap in the market. Like the farmers market sold a zucchini, some bell peppers, and some weed. That's basically it was all a cover up for selling marijuana, or at least that's what I heard. So yeah, I brought kind of like that Cajun upbringing into Herb Saint and kind of melded it with the French training and French experience in the French restaurants that I worked at. And we did that for quite a few years and started to really form our own farmer network, which led us to Cochon. And because, I got tired of people asking me where a good Cajun restaurant was. And it's a hard question to answer because, it's a home-cooked thing. It's not really a restaurant thing. So they're kind of almost, you could go so far as say there aren't any, right? Am I?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
so that's kind of a hard question. So my idea with Cochon was, well, why don't we do one? And I was fortunate enough. My grandparents, on one side were from Alabama, and the other side were from Crowley, but they lived a half a mile from each other. So I grew up with this amazing Southern food, with my granddad retired and just farming his own stuff, and then all the Cajun stuff. So I had this incredible upbringing when it comes to food, and that's where I wanted to bring that in with Cochon. And we found a guy that we got a shrimp guy. We have a pig guy that raises pigs and we've been doing that one for 20 years. We still get his pigs. So we just kind of developed our own way of cooking. And you're right about the bones. I wanted to put bone in gumbo so bad, but I can just hear it all. Like, there's bones in here. That will go. Just for the record, I still make my gumbo at home with the bones in it.
Me too.
I just don't think you can make it the same. It just... Yeah. You can make the stocks. You can roast the chicken. It's still, I don't know. It's the skins too. I think.
Right.
Like cooking all that together, it just makes a more like a gumbo I grew up with. It's hard to replicate. I think we get pretty close at the restaurants, but never quite the same. And then we continued, to look at our talent and our staff, and that's what happens in a restaurant is. You develop this amazing talent, and then what? You let them go, and then then you can't really grow the business, and you can't provide opportunities. So the reason for the growth was, obviously, school's expensive for the kids, so that helps. But it's a lot of talent, man. You hate to see them walk out of the door. So providing opportunities became part of our mission as a restaurant group, and that's why we ended up. With so many places, and I'm kind of waiting right now. I figure if we're going to do anything else, I'll let my daughter do it.
And I'm gonna get back to that topic. Chef Eric Cook, as we talk about it, and we talk about gumbo, we talk about the different ingredients, the seafood, the food pantry that we have here, the bounty of Louisiana. It's interesting to see how you take those staples and now you start to make it your own, make that blend your own. You shared a conversation with us about working in other kitchens and now wanting to express who you are. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, I'm an 100% accidental restaurant guy. It was never in the plan for me. This is all plan B. Plan A for me was obviously I joined the Marines, and growing up in New Orleans. Yesterday was my birthday, so I'm 55. So, yeah, EJ's birthday is Saturday. It was like that was it. I grew up. D stands for diploma. Let's go, man. Because I graduated high school, I'm going to the Marines. So, but growing up in New Orleans, I grew up in Araby in St. Bernard Parish. You're surrounded by great food. It's every day. You don't see it. We are. When I grew up, we all do. We grew up around our house. We were nose blind to the great opportunity we have in front of us because you don't know. You're a kid, like, dude, I want to go ride my bike. I want to play some basketball. Let's get the hell out of here. I don't want to be at the table, And so I didn't really understand all that until I got out of the Marines. I landed at a kitchen, in the quarter with no idea what was going on at all. I think my first day at work, I had like a pair of topsiders, a pair of khakis, like a button-down shirt, and like applying for like a cashier job at like Kmart or something. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, man, And chef threw me in the back, and I was just peeling shrimp and potatoes, and that's kind of what I did around my house anyway. And, looking back, those, professionals who were in that kitchen on Royal Street, the lessons I learned there are some of the closest lessons I keep now. It was the old school stuff, it was the classic New Orleans food. It was like we talked about, trout amandine, that I've never seen anyone make a trout amandine like Gerald Spears made in the back kitchen of Brennan's, like effortlessly. It was just boop, and he did it. Like, how do you do that? It'd take me a million times to do it. But you go through your career and you get motivated. The industry has changed since I've been in it, since the early 90s. Obviously, it's always evolving, but the molecular gastronomy part, everything was math. Everyone's using transglutamate powder, and we're pounding out short ribs and making roulades and blah, 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 blah. And it just became like math. And I'm like, I hate math, School is stupid, I'm like, that's why I'm not a baker, because cooking is emotional and baking is not cooking. Baking is math. So, like ask my daughter, she's the best baker in the house because she's good at math. And she's like, bing, 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 perfect bread. I can't do it. But it was that emotion, as I went through my career and realized that I was kind of getting bored with the whole like molecular gastronomy thing. Like, I don't want to eat out of a baby bottle and think that's cool. Like, I want to eat food, man. I want, and so we kind of adopted the motto, when we got into the restaurant, that brown on brown is the new black. That's it. Like, give me some gravy, man, because our food is ugly. You know what I mean? We don't have beautiful food in New Orleans. It's just not, It's red gravy, brown gravy, white gravy. Which way you want to go? Can I do them all? Yeah, you load me up, bro. So that was it. And when I started really getting into really at the World War II Museum at the American sector when I was there, because it was the first time I was at a restaurant where the restaurant's not important. It was the museum is important, the mission of the museum, the stories behind that museum, and then you're very humbled in the restaurant just to be a part of it, so you just have to stand up well enough to respect that museum. And so we really got into, like, American food, like, let's go, Meatloaf Monday, like, pot roast Wednesdays, chicken and dumplings, and we really started getting Southern. And as we opened up that box, the memories came back, like my grandmother's oyster dressing, my dad's secret barbecued shrimp recipe that only he knew, I remember being a kid standing on the stepladder, on that crappy linoleum floor, with the double-decker oven, like looking in the oven, like, oh, what's the secret, Dad? Like, I can't tell you the secret, it's Dad's recipe, So that was it. Mom was, Monday through Friday with the 3 squares a day. Here's some burnt toast with some powdered sugar on it. Get out, go to school, hurry up, go away. And it was this big pot cooking, red beans, white beans, chicken and dumplings, so she was, a lot of kids in the house wanted to get out of there. And my dad took over on the weekends. So that memory, those foods to me became so much more intriguing and so much more complex, because behind every one of these, when you say, you don't ever have the best gumbo in New Orleans. You have the second best, and that's okay, because you never want to go like, oh, yeah, I got your grandma, bro. It's better. You don't. You don't want to start that fight. So having good gumbo is one thing. And like Donald's upbringing, when you get out to Lake Charles, you get out to Lafayette, you get Vermilion Parish. Our menu says Vermilion Parish. Paris de Vermilion. Inspired gumbo. So we were inspired by Lafayette. Some of my best friends I still hunt with and fish with live in Delcombe and Lafayette, and they don't eat gumbo in New Orleans. They just don't. And I had a few people from Lafayette say, you're the only restaurant in New Orleans I'll eat gumbo at. And I was like, oh, cool, we must be doing something right, But the evolution for me was just going back home, and remembering those family dinners and remembering those moments of mostly all the things my sisters hated that I loved. That was the good stuff, and it was just, home cooking and digging back into the family and finding my mère, my grandmother's recipes and going, dude, I'm doing this, and translating that into the restaurant, because restaurants are an extension of us, our homes, our family, our history. And so I wanted people to eat what people in New Orleans eat, because unfortunately a lot of times, you go somewhere and you're not eating New Orleans food. You know what I mean? Like, we don't wake up at 8 in the morning and start charbroiling oysters and blackening our redfish. We eat regular food, man. We're from the South. We have this great bounty, So for me, it was about getting back to those everyday meals and then the special occasion food to really introduce people to what we really eat in New Orleans. You know, I mean, what we're cooking, you're cooking in your kitchens, which I still do every day in my own home. You know, those family dinners to me are what we try to do in the restaurants.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that segues into the next conversation. You hear those family stories, you hear those traditions, you hear those cultures, you hear the word legacy and continuing on. And as before I ask you this question, I want to congratulate you. This Wednesday, Emerald celebrated 35 years of culinary excellence at the flagship.
Appreciate it.
And I'm going to read a brief from that press release. 35 years ago, a young chef with an uncompromising vision transformed a former warehouse in downtown New Orleans into a groundbreaking restaurant that redefined Creole cuisine. Today, Chef E.J. Lagasse and his talented team carry on Emerald's culinary legacy and strive to deliver an elevated dining and hospitality experience with Louisiana culture at its cornerstone. And the reason why I touched on that is that word, continuing the legacy. We use it often in our family. But you being the fourth coming up behind Chef Emerald Lagasse, how do you honor that legacy in 35 years, but also find room to tell your story as you're coming through?
Well, first of all, let me just, what a pleasure it is to be with four absolute icons of the New Orleans culinary sphere. I don't know why y'all chose me to be on this stage with you, but I appreciate the invite. Look, I mean, 35 years is a great thing, and it's something that we're so proud of. And look, I've been back in New Orleans for about 3 years now, but you know, I grew up in that restaurant. My earliest memories, talking about it yesterday with a friend, my earliest memories in my life were at Emerald's, and we're running around and probably making a lot of people mad in the line because I was like running around and they had to pick me up, put me on shoulders and stuff. But I think that, you know, you just heard from the three to my right that about all of the special heritage that is New Orleans, from early memories to familial memories. And, you know, I really liked what you said about our restaurants being extensions of our family and extensions of our, you know, our homes, our living rooms, our kitchens, and the memories that come with that. So, you know, from my perspective, it's the barbecue shrimp at Emerald's is like, I didn't have baby food. That was baby food. You know what I mean? Like that it was. And so, you know, what we've been able to do with the restaurant and the renovation, you know, a year and a half ago, was really take it and distill it back down to what my dad wanted that restaurant to always be, which was a white tablecloth restaurant. I tried to fight the white tablecloth and do something else with some custom tables. He wasn't having it, so we're sticking with the white tablecloths for 35 more years, I promise. But he wanted it to be a beautiful white tablecloth fine dining restaurant that represented New Orleans and whatever that meant to the guest that was sitting at the table. If they were visiting New Orleans for the first time, trying to have a lot of different bites throughout the meal that let people know that they were in New Orleans and had that sense of food, a place. And you know, now that obviously we've gone back, the restaurant opened with an a la carte menu and a tasting menu. Now we're just tasting menu. Our wine bar is a la carte, but the dining room is tasting menu. And I really now aim to have, you know, it's like 10 to 13 courses depending on how you run the night. And in each of those bites, to try to have something that definitely shows people, oh, I'm in New Orleans. If it's a baby po' boy to, you know, trot almondine or something like that, have something in there that people can say, oh, I didn't miss a thing when I was in New Orleans. And then for our locals, having the moments that they can close their eyes and they're still eating, you know, the Emerald's banana cream pie, and close their eyes and they're still eating that barbecue shrimp that I grew up on. That to me was the most important thing. So it's certainly paying homage to all of that, but also looking at how we can carry the dining experience forward in different ways and really just do what, you know, what everybody up on this stage has been doing for a long time, and it's carry on their traditions and their family traditions and whatever that means to, you know, the individual and go from there. So.
No, thank you. Yeah. And I'll say, In 2024, Emerald received AAA, it's themed 5-diamond designation in the restaurant. I'm not sure if there's any other. Are there any others in this city, in this state?
I'm not sure. You'd have to fact check that.
I want to say no. So I want to tell y'all the elevation that Chef EJ is bringing to the table of not only continuing that legacy, continuing that tradition, but now putting his mark on a flagship restaurant that was already at the high. So you're bringing it up to the next level. We certainly appreciate that.
Very kind of you.
Here in New Orleans, because not only do you bring people here to visit your restaurant, they come to Dookie's, they come to Pesh, they come to Gree and everybody else's restaurant.
That's the goal at the end of it. So
That's it.
But as we talk about evolution and we talk about being the next generation, I want you all to know how good hands we are in the cuisine here in New Orleans. I want to touch on two people that's not on this stage, but the next evolution of your restaurant group. I hear you have a daughter that's in the industry in Chicago that's making waves, and hopefully we get her back down here. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, she's always been. I have two children. One's just started LSU, the son, the boy child we call him. Just kidding. My daughter, yeah, she's always been involved in the restaurants in some way. She used to, when it was just Herb Saint, her mother worked and she would drop her off at the bar at Herb Saint. So we were closed in between lunch and dinner, and we'd sit her at the bar. And I guess her first day in the kitchen would technically be when she was 4. So I used her to embarrass one of the line cooks. This is probably a terrible story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So this one cook is always being a pain in the ass. I mean, he was terrible, always forgetting things, telling me to settle around when his food wasn't ready. So one day he was forming these little, risotto cakes, I think, and the pucks, putting it on a scale, and when it says 4. So I brought her in there. I said, step aside for a minute. I put a little milk crate on the station and had her shape it, put it, when it says 4, put it here. She started doing that, and I said, see, man, 4-year-old can do your job. So that was her first day. And then around 12, she started working in the pastry kitchen. She'd been a hostess at Herb Saint, a waiter at Pesh. She worked at the Boulangerie. So she's been around. She went to Denver for hospitality management, got bored, moved to Paris on her own, finished her degree at the Cordon Bleu Restaurant Management School in Paris, and then just blew away all my connections and went straight to Chicago and found her own work, which, she wanted to do it without me helping her. So she's searching around right now. We looked at apartments a couple days ago, and so it's possible. It's just, it's great for me because, like 15 years old, that's, 40 years now in kitchens. I mean, I still, literally last night had a nightmare about being in the kitchen, and the grill's broke. I don't have shoes on.
classic.
It's always some night, it's never, life in the kitchen is always working to a countdown. There's a time that everything has to be done. It's called service. So you're always in this, everything is leading up to that moment in your entire life. So you can't shake it. But what's really exciting to me right now is we did this trip to Japan with one of the chefs, the chef at Herb Saint. And the idea was to get inspiration and get ideas. Before we opened Gianna, my daughter came with us on this trip through Campania, through Italy. We've done that a few times, and it just kind of creates this excitement because to me the restaurants they're not just about, you're right, it's not just a job. It is our childhood. It is what we grew up with, and people ask me, I get this in interviews, like, do you think people that aren't from Louisiana can cook Louisiana food? And I said, well, my question would be, what is your measure, I guess? I grew up here. I have a measure. It's my grandparents' cooking. It's what I grew up with. If you're not from here, how are you measuring what it tastes like? So I won't say yes or no, but I think you probably infer the answer. But there is that, and that's what my kids have, and that's what EJ grew up with, and Eric, and I grew up eating the same food as Marcelle, and I have it in my head, and I know it when I have it, and that's where I think she comes in. Is like I'm excited to see her and the young chefs that I have working through the company. I mean, we're up to 575 employees at this point. So there's it's not just
A lot of headache.
this is a whole other world, man. we're looking at her taking over. So.
You know, it's funny hearing those stories because my family and my grandparents would always say they educated everybody out the business, but we always find our way back home. We always find our way back to the restaurant. Chef Eric Cook, I know you have a next generation that's working alongside you and maybe getting ready to kick you out.
Yeah, we tried to steer her away from it.
They tried with me too, it didn't work.
Yeah, like, no, you know. And clearly, I mean, you know, and for the most part is like, you got to understand, like, you know, and I'm sure Donald can attest, somebody can attest to it. You know, kitchens aren't, and restaurants aren't like, you know, maybe what people think they see on TV, you know, and I don't know how to describe it to you, you know. And for me, coming out of the Marines, I'll tell you how I got involved in the kitchen is because when I left the Marine Corps, and I left out of a combat environment and got flown home on a plane and like dropped back in the world like, oh, here you go, good luck being a citizen again. And I'm like, what? You know, like you go from, you know, combat to reality, it's very different. And when I hit the kitchen in the French Quarter, very much like a military unit, a combat military unit. It's violent, it's vulgar, it's loud, it's insane. Everyone is drunk or has been drunk or on something. You know, there's a chain of command, there's an executive chef, there's an XO, CEO, you know, so, you know, yes sir, no sir became yes chef, no chef, you know. But it's a violent world, it's a crazy world. And it's changed, obviously, culture has changed. We're all like, everybody be nice to each other, you know. But restaurants have always been, this is how we have to do it. And there's been a pendulum shift in restaurants towards that, let's take care of our mental health. Great, then let's not run the business. Because the business, unfortunately, requires a certain amount of dedication, insane hours, unrealistic expectations that you need to meet. Like you talk about those, the build up to service, you know, it's insane. So my daughter, Liz, who's with us today, she grew up in that kitchen and she got the good end of it growing up. You know, like, you know, her friends, you know, parents like, we're going to Commander's Palace, we're taking Liz. I'm like, great. And they would go to Commanders, you know, and they'd be like, oh, hi, good to see y'all. And then my daughter would walk in with them like, Liz! And they would like all stop. They bring her in the kitchen. The chefs all high-five her, and she's running around the line, you know. So that's the fun part of the restaurant. The hard part is the work, you know. But, you know, she went away to the UK for a couple of years, and she's back now in the restaurant, and she's running our events and running our private functions, and basically, you know, an all-around, you know, manager for the restaurants in both. And it's just a different world, you know, but when the legacy we have, the memories we have in that kitchen, you know, because you talk about having those flavors embedded in you as a kid and growing up, she has that same thing. She's been in that kitchen with me. We cut our first onion together, you know, we did all the things, you know, but it's having that hospitality, I think, is what it is, because of all the crazy, of all the nuts, of all the things you guys never read about what really goes on in those big battleships behind the curtain, you know, the Wizard of Oz story, you know, it's hospitality that matters, you know, and New Orleans does it like no other town. You know, we've got just such an amazing culture of hospitality, you know, and that's the big challenge in the restaurant is, you know, we're on stage. We have to be in character every day, every time, because it may not be our best day, but it's somebody else's best day. And we've got to remember that every day. You know, I tell the guys in the kitchen, the best thing about today is there's no tomorrow. Every day I say it. The best thing about today is there's no tomorrow, because tomorrow doesn't matter. Because what matters is who's in front of you right now, what's going on at this moment. It doesn't matter what you did yesterday. It doesn't matter what's happening tomorrow. You need to do it right now. You know, so you let everything go and you focus on that mission, you know, and you focus on the hospitality and the culture and how people perceive us and the city and our you know, our everything we do, music, food, architecture, stems from those great conversations in those dining rooms that are all over the city of New Orleans, you know. So it's a rough business, but when you get it in your blood, you'll never shake it.
And I think that's, you know, as much as we say we push our kids to do other things, I think it's all of our kids growing up in the restaurant business what brings us back home. I can remember running through our restaurants, shining silverware. My kids are doing the same thing. They're excited to come participate. But I want to touch back on something we stated earlier, talking about the home-cooked meals that we had in our family. And how are we trying to recreate that same experience, that same taste, that same flavor, whether it's bone-in chicken in a gumbo that gives it that great flavor and taste with the skin on. I want to say, Chef Marcelle, are we getting it right? Right? You know, in a restaurant scene,
Yeah, we
it's
doing
hard
this
to
thing
do
right?
that. Are we getting it right from back then and experiencing that same flavor, that's gathering that we want to create in our restaurants?
Yeah, we said earlier, who makes the best gumbo? Your grandma or whoever. And I think that, we all come from a little bit different back area in South Louisiana. And, I remember working at Oak Alley Plantation on Fridays, they would have fried catfish with white beans and rice. And I went, no, 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 no. So they said, well, what do you have your fried catfish? I said, we had potato salad. So there's these little things, so probably Donald's grandmother or mother's gumbo is a little bit different from mine. And so, but they're good. The first rule is there's no rule. And I think that I've been enjoying seeing what's happening to the culinary scene in New Orleans in the last, I think since Katrina. We've gone through another evolution. And Ella was a mentor to me. She said, food should not always stay the same except at your mama's house. It has to be like, I remember doing a recipe and it called for canned mushrooms. And I went, oh, I'll use the fresh ones. Well, it didn't taste right. That's, the original one was with that. So I really have been enjoying seeing a lot of, like now I have Cajun Asian.
Yeah.
And I think people are still using the local ingredients. I think they all have a taste for something. And I think there's a lot of excitement in the New Orleans culinary scene right now. I'm really impressed, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And for me, thinking of those stories, thinking of growing up with those home-cooked meals, as I leave the restaurant and go home, I'll be honest, my wife does mostly all the cooking at home. I just get to taste and critique. But I think when you think of the stories that we're sharing here, of those traditions started at home, and now in today's world, everything being so fast-paced, how do we ensure we get back to that so the next generation has those same strings to draw from, those same pulls, whether it's at home, whether it's at your restaurant? What do you think on that, Jeff?
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is everybody has to eat, right? That's my dad has always said that. He's like, everybody's got to drink water, everybody's got to eat at some point in the day. And so it's an important thing just in that sense. But I think that, to your point, with everything being so fast-paced these days and instant gratification with everything and social media and all of that, I think that it's very nice to be able to sit around a table with your parents or your kids or friends and sit and enjoy a meal anywhere on the planet and sit down. And we're so lucky and fortunate to be able to do that. And we're so lucky and we're also fortunate to be in the business of being able to provide people with those experiences. And like what you were saying about you can't have a bad day because you're being trusted with people's most important memories in their lives, their birthdays, their anniversaries, their job promotion, their congratulations, they're getting engaged. People come to our restaurants to celebrate those moments.
Right.
And we owe it to them to provide them with the best experience we can. And you can look at that from a food standpoint or from a hospitality or service standpoint. And I just think that that's why I love the restaurant business. I love to cook, obviously, and I love food, and it's like my favorite, that's all I think about. But I love the emotion behind it that we're all allowed to bring to work every day. We get to bring that to work and give people these experiences, and I think that's probably the most important thing. And for me, we obviously said we celebrated 35 years, and my goal for the next 35 is to continue to provide people with those special occasion memories. And I've had so many people, as I'm sure you all do, have come up to you and say, oh, I went to Emerald's 27 years ago and I got engaged and your dad came out and he said to me, oh yeah, best of luck with everything. And to me, that's one of the coolest things about our business. And I think that if we focus on that, we focus on using, the bounty of Southeast Louisiana, the bounty of the Gulf and the bounty of the region, that we do those two things and I think we'll just be all right, so.
No, thanks for sharing. And that is the key. That is what our restaurants, specifically in this city, try to do. Create those memories, cherish those memories, and keep people coming back and enjoying their family and creating that dialogue. You know, it's some of those things where you grow up in the business, you find that balance of time. We would always open up for Thanksgiving, and behind Thanksgiving service, we would bring the family in. We do that for Christmas as well. We all go to the restaurant and eat our Christmas dinner there. But continuing that legacy is really an honor that we have as that next generation coming up, not only for our businesses, but the sustainability of our cuisine here. I know many of you here have some cookbooks. Yours just came out in September. If you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Modern Creole came out in September, and it's basically just what I talked about earlier. It was, the idea wasn't to make Creole modern. The idea was to tell you that Creole is modern. There's no new twist, chemical change on roux. It's just like, hey, this is what's been going on in New Orleans for 300 plus years, and it's happening right now in many great restaurants in this city, and it's going to continue to happen. So, Creole doesn't get that notation of, oh, old food, It's a modern thing. And when you dig into the history and the origins and the cultures that came together to create this still ever-changing cuisine that we have unique to ourselves, it's one of the most complex and most amazing things in the world that you can share with people. Yeah. And so it's a great book. Lots of family recipes, lots of great stories about growing up in those kitchens, working in the quarter, family meals, crew meals, fishing trips. It's just a nice read, and it's a very approachable book. Yep.
Thank you. And I really want you all to go in and look at the many different cookbooks that we have, because it's not about cooking great recipes. It's not only about that. But it's about the moment that you're getting ready to create with your family, your friends, that dialogue. We have to get back to those stories of sitting around a table, sharing who we are, cherishing our culture, and celebrating our culture. My grandmother passed at 96. But at 96, she was in our restaurant reading cookbooks, reading magazines, learning from people, learning from different cultures, because she understood the connectivity of people, the connectivity of food, what brings us together, what helps us create that dialogue. And she understood the importance of this has to last from generation and generation and generation. So thank you all for being here. This has been a wonderful panel. I've been excited to be a part of and continue to learn from all of you. And let's keep this going. We need next generation. 84 years has to be 100, 34 to 70, 25 to 50, and on and on and on. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank y'all.